For nearly 150 years, the Harvard Crimson has been one of America's most respected student newspapers. But now a controversy over the paper's reporting is raising questions about whether the paper's values square with those of their audience. Adam Riley has more.
Harvard is home to plenty of student activism, which means plenty of student protests.
And as long as one of us isn't free, none of us is free.
And when protests happen, it's par for the course for the Harvard Crimson to cover them. But this September article about students calling to abolish U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, sparked a fierce backlash. The issue? The Crimson asked ICE for comment.
Calls to boycott the Harvard Crimson, as well as a petition that was signed by hundreds of students.
That petition accuses the Crimson of blatantly endangering undocumented students and demands that the paper apologize. It's the latest case of student journalists taking heat for doing their jobs. Back in 2015, a communication professor at the University of Missouri tried to prevent coverage of a protest.
You need to get out.
I actually don't.
All right. Hey, who wants to help me get this reporter out of here?
That same year, students pushed to defund the Wesleyan Argus after it ran an op-ed criticizing Black Lives Matter, prompting the editor to say this.
I think it speaks to my generation as a whole. I think feelings are getting prioritized over our ability to have a dialogue.
But at Harvard, the student group Act on a Dream says it's about more than feelings, arguing that ICE has a history of targeting activists and that the protesters interviewed didn't know ICE would be contacted. The Crimson stands by its reporting, saying a world where news outlets let third-party groups dictate the terms of their coverage is a less informed, less accurate, and ultimately less democratic world.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this is no matter whose editorial you read, the Boston Herald, the Globe, whoever, everybody feels the same way about it. Even some of the columnists, Howie Carr, everybody has used the same phrase, journalism 101. This group doesn't want to respond now. A number of people have tried to get in touch with them. And I wonder if they've had a change of heart at all. I mean, first of all, didn't they know that ICE doesn't return phone calls? I don't think they've changed their minds at all.
I don't know, but this is... I had a similar situation many years ago where I did an interview about a story. It had to do with Israel, actually. And someone contacted me and said they thought the story was unfair. And I said, well, what's unfair about my story? They said, because you included the other side. And I was shocked. And I thought, oh, okay, that's how some people think. That was a middle-aged individual. But I think among younger people, probably because this is part of a generation now, where they read publications that only, or social media content or whatever, that only goes along with what they agree with. And they are now growing up thinking that that's kind of what journalism is about. And I think they're wrong on that.
Oh, I don't blame the kids. I blame the Harvard kids. No, I mean, this is absurd. I'll tell you how absurd it is. The activists pointed to two stories in Vice News that showed where ICE had tried to retaliate against activists. And in both of those stories in Vice News said, Vice attempted to reach ICE for comment. Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And the Crimson did not try to seek comment until after the protests. Right. And they weren't identifying anybody. It's ridiculous.
It's absolutely the way that story has to be reported is to make the call. I mean, an advisor to the Harvard Crimson would have probably been all over them if they hadn't done it, it seems to me. It's kind of the classic way to approach it. And also, yeah, as you say, the charge that ICE was going to follow up just doesn't hold water at all. Not in that kind of story.
I mean, it's easy to ridicule the kids in this group for their ignorance, and they deserve to be ridiculed. However, your story noted that hundreds of other Harvard students from a variety of different groups signed this petition. So this ignorance is widespread. It speaks to the fact that many people, not just undergraduates, don't understand how the media works, the most basic things about it. It also speaks to a culture, particularly among the young, but also among others, who don't realize that when you do something in the public space, tweet, make a Facebook post, hold a public rally, it becomes public. Right. And it may well be reported on.
All right. Stay tuned.